the Cash Flow Code. And my guest today is Stu Heinecke, and he is the author of How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed. He's been a cartoonist for the Wall Street Journal, and it sounds like he's done lots of other interesting things along the way. And I'm sure we'll learn a few of them as we have our conversation. So let's get started because I'm kind of curious what weeds and businesses have in common. And I'm sure Stu can tell us, so let's bring him on. Hey,
I have
Stu,
no
how are you
idea.
today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks, Josh.
So tell me, how do weeds and businesses get along? I would think that businesses wouldn't want weeds, but that's just me.
Yeah, it's probably a funny analogy, but here's the thing: we all understand what it means to grow like a weed, right? Everybody knows that is known around the world, and we can see them growing in our yards and in the, I don't know, the roadways. We see them growing everywhere, and I think we've got a pretty good sense of what weeds do to spread and grow and conquer turf, which I guess is kind of analogous to us conquering turf in our markets. So they have a lot. There's a lot in common.
So, where does your book start, and what is the premise that we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, well, so a long time ago, I was driving down the Santa Monica Freeway in Los Angeles. It's a pretty big freeway. It's 6 lanes of traffic coming one way, 6 lanes going the other way, and about a 40-foot wide concrete median in the middle. Actually, it's just a lot of concrete and rushing tires, and it is definitely no place for any plant to take root yet. As I was driving down the freeway, I saw what all of us see: a dandelion growing out of a crack in the concrete. They all, they do that all. It's such a non-event actually to see a dandelion sticking out of a crack in the concrete. But when I did when I drove by this one, I just thought, wow, look at that thing. I mean, it's in the sea of impossibility, of rushing tires and concrete, and it's just growing out of a crack. How does it even get water? I mean, what is it? How is it doing this? And I just thought that's so impressive that there it is. It looked happy, actually. It was kind of bouncing around, those yellow flowers and those happy seed pods blowing the seeds around, and it looked kind of happy, just in the middle of a freeway, running its process. And I just thought how impressive that is, and I hope that I could live up to that example in my career. And I was a young guy then, and it just got sent me on a journey of, okay, well, how do weeds do this? What are they? Is there is there are they a specific species? They're not really. But is that what it is, or do they have a model that? First of all, do they all use the same model? Is there a unified model there? And if there is, can we use it in business? And it turns out there is a unified model, and oh yeah, we can use it in our business. In fact, I think weed strategy. That's what I'm calling. All of this is my invention because no one's ever written about this, but so I'm calling it weed strategy just as the subject matter. And I think weed strategy is the theory of everything about growing anything. Does that make sense? Because that theory of anything, or I mean of everything, is actually borrowed from physics.
Okay, can you expand a little bit more on that? Because I'm not really quite sure I'm getting
Yeah,
what you're
well, I
going
mean,
after.
so uh, um, physicists always they're looking for, and scientists, they're looking for that unified theory. What ties everything together? What explains reality? What explains relativity? And so there is the theory of relativity and string theory and so forth. They're still searching because those theories still don't cover the whole thing. We still don't understand how, I don't know, black holes work, what's happening there, and so forth. They haven't quite come across that one theory that ties it all together. But in terms of growing things, weeds really have it down. And so they have that model, I guess I should describe to you. But I would also say that, going back to that freeway example, um, I think it's significant that it's dandelions growing out of the crack versus, let's say, there aren't apple trees growing out of the cracks in the concrete, or petunias, or most other plants, because really they're too polite. They don't have what it takes to be a weed. In business, we should have what it takes to be a weed. In fact, really, I would say that I would characterize their I don't know, their approach to growth is as this: they deal with what is. That sounds so simple, but it's like we're so lost in our emotions, the thing that we didn't get, or things that we should have, or if only this thing didn't happen, I'd be over here instead of where I am. None of those things matter to weeds. They just deal with what is. And they never do anything without an unfair advantage. You can see that with the dandelions, for example. They have those seeds that fly around, unlike pine cones and I don't know, apples and acorns that don't fly around and really they don't probe their environment for opportunities to take root like dandelions do. That's because they're seeds. So they never do anything without an unfair advantage. They never do anything alone. They're natural collaborators. They just operate at scale, and we should too. And then finally, they always focus on what works, and that really I think is probably a good definition of a or description of a successful business person or business owner. But yeah, I mean, I think that is exactly how we need to approach the growth of our businesses. When you think about
So Stu,
focusing on what,
let me just
oh
ask you
yeah,
a
go ahead.
question.
Yeah.
What does what works means? What does that mean? I mean, I know what it means. It means, what's working, you have to do that. But how would a business owner who's not getting stuff that works know how to find stuff that works? In other words, not getting the results they want, and they want different results, and they know they need to look at what works, but how do they find that?
Well, I guess they need to probe a bit and test things and find ultimately what we're talking about is building a process. And I know that's I think we're in deep agreement, and we all should be in deep agreement that process is really quite important to businesses because it's how we accumulate experience and expertise and then map it across our organizations. If we have organizations, I mean, we could be talking about solopreneurs as well, but we need processes to define what works in our businesses so that we can focus on those things. And I would say also that if we don't have, a lot of us own businesses, and I think a lot of us expect to perhaps maybe sell our businesses when we come to retirement age. But if you don't have a process that is recorded and able to be transferred to a new owner, you don't even have a business. So I'm talking about process.
So what you're talking about is systems then.
Pardon me, systems, but also practices. It probably is systems. Yeah, I think that probably is a pretty good way to think of it. But it's what is it that again? What is it that causes you to win? And then yes, you should systematize it. But what is it? So whatever it is, whatever those things are, the thing you're in business because you're an expert at something. So what is the sum total of that expertise? What is it that allows you to compete with others in your market and win? What are those things that cause you to win? And those are the things that you need to focus on.
So if I've been in business for 20 years, and many listeners to the show have been in business for 20 years, what worked 20 years ago probably is not working today. So would you relate that to how weeds manage to maintain over a long period of time?
There are a few things. And in fact, really, I should give you the four elements of the weed model because that'll help us with our with this question and our discussion.
Sure.
All weeds do the same thing. They come in all shapes and sizes. They're all over the world. They're on 6 continents, not in Antarctica, but they've spread. A lot of these species have spread all the way around the world, and they all do the same thing. They all leverage a fierce mindset and unfair advantages against collective scale, and they do it according to a process that is, well, in their case, really well honed. It's millions of years old, but that process is also a living process that allows them to encounter whatever challenges they may encounter and find solutions and circumvent those or just solve those challenges. So, but that's what it is mindset. Odd to think that a weed would have a mindset, but mindset, unfair advantages, collective scale, and process. So you were asking about change and how do we gird I don't know if it's girding, but how do it's almost like surfing a wave. I don't want to I don't want to mix metaphors, but we want to surf that change. We want to take advantage of those changes. We certainly need to recognize that they happen, and then have a plan to deal with those things. So when we look at, let's say, the weed mindset. Um, by the way, we're not. Just to clear up any confusion, we're not talking about the kind of weed you smoke. No,
Right. Yeah.
not at all. And the weed mindset probably sounds Just as odd, but it's not a bunch of guys sitting around smoking doobs saying, wow, that's not the mindset we're talking. We're talking about the mindset that you can observe in weeds, let's say in your yard. When you cut them down, when you pull them out, we try to pull them out, you'll find that they go right back to running their process and regrowing. They're not daunted, they're not depressed by it. They just do it. They run it urgently and aggressively. They're adaptive and resilient and perseverant. And those are the things that we need to be in business as well. I think if you've been in business for 20 years, you know that. You've been employing that. But I think another one, though, another aspect of their mindset that perhaps we don't do as well is that they are natural collaborators. And I've got to tell you, as I wrote the book, and then as I was editing it, I just was thinking. I run a small agency, so I run a small business, and it got me just examining what I was doing, and I'm realizing, my God, I'm making all kinds of mistakes here, according to what the weeds suggest as a model for explosive growth.
So, when you say collaboration, what specifically do you mean by that?
Well, we're pardon me, we are. We're trained to be self-sufficient. Um, I guess I could trace it back to playing musical chairs in kindergarten. The first time the music stops, you're caught without a chair. Next time you said, "Where's my chair?" Well, oh, I get it. Okay, I see now. I have to be vigilant about this and proactive, that teaches you sort of the beginnings of being self-sufficient. And then we go on to we're encouraged to go to school and get good grades and get into a good college, perhaps, and get good grades that you get a great job. And the problem is that we can't scale jobs. You can't have 1,000 jobs. Our businesses can scale, but not if they're set up like a job, I suppose. So if you're a solopreneur, then I think that probably the biggest problem you face is you're everything in the business. So you do everything that needs to be done, and it's not efficient. Um, it's not efficient because you're not an expert at everything. And I would say entrepreneurs are probably some of the most self-sufficient people on the planet. So we can. I think we're both. We're. I mean, rather, we're all used to teaching ourselves how to do things, and we
So,
could probably do a lot of those things pretty well.
so Stu, can we talk about how we collaborate with a company with 20 people, not a solopreneur?
Yes. Yeah. Well, so I think I would say that one of the key attributes, or one of the key directives of the weeds model, is that we need to borrow the infrastructure of other. We need to borrow from others. So, and if we're doing everything ourselves, it's one-to-one leverage. That was where I was going with self-sufficiency. But we need to root out all forms of one-to-one leverage and find a lot of alliances. And it might make sense to tell you. Maybe I could explain this by giving you a couple examples of my own. Would that work?
It possibly could.
Could. Okay. Um, well, I've written this book, How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed, and,
Yes.
and of course I want it to grow. I mean, I want it to spread around the world, and so I can't I can't do that by myself. I have to create alliances, and one of the alliances I've created is with the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. So I asked their executive director to write the foreword. She did. So there's already a great connection with the center. But I mentioned in the book that I want to start up a new award called the Total Weed Award. And I want to do it for a few reasons, but one of them, just selfishly, one of the things I want to do is keep drawing attention to weed strategy in the book. I want people to be seeing weeds popping up every spring and saying, "Oh my God, the weeds are coming." Oh, but wait a minute, there's that book. I want them thinking about the book. So I had suggested to, or approached the executive director at the NASDAQ Center, and I said, "I've got this award. I said I would launch in the book. Would you like to partner with me on this?" So it's an alliance. I'm suggesting, would you like to partner with me on this? Um, and we can sell sponsorship against it, and we could turn it into. I don't need to take any of the money from the sponsorship. We could turn it into a fundraiser for the center. Would you be interested? Oh yes, we would be. Well, so now I'm a small business, but I now have a partnership brewing with NASDAQ. That's a terrific It's a terrific alliance to have, and it's a great, just a quantum engagement in terms of, of the outcome being much bigger than the sum of the parts. Does that make
So,
sense?
yeah, it makes sense. So, Stu, here's what the thought is to me. Is that most business owners I know are terrible collaborators. And I think there's a major reason for that is most business owners have a really hard time with the word trust. They're not very good at it. And in my experience, the only way you get collaboration or even cooperation for that matter, we can go into a long conversation between cooperation and collaboration. But the reason that I don't think we get collaboration and the best place to get it is within my own company is I'm not sure I really trust the people that work for me. So my question would be, how would a business owner get over that hurdle once they identified it and they actually believed it was a thing for them?
Well, I think the first thing is they have to check themselves, and they've got to be, well, again, going back to scaling like a weed. Essentially, we need to root out all forms of one-to-one leverage. If you don't trust people, then you're going to be stuck in one-to-one leverage. When you take a vacation, the business stops. If you get sick, the business stops. If you want to sell the business, there's nothing to sell. So you have to break out of one-to-one leverage, and the way to do that very quickly is to move from one-to-one leverage to multi-channel leverage, and eventually to collective scale if you're pushing it to the limit. But multi-channel leverage is about, again, it's about creating leverage through collaboration. I'm going to keep well, yeah, long after we're done with our conversation, I'll be harping on collaboration. We need to collaborate or we're not going to scale. So we have to get past all the things that are holding us in one-to-one leverage. And certainly one of those is trust. If you don't trust the people you work with, figure out why and fix it. Maybe you need new people. I don't know, or maybe there's something that's out of alignment in the business. If you don't trust the people you're working with, that's a pretty tough. That's a pretty terrible circumstance to find yourself in.
So in my experience with smaller business owners, not companies that have hundreds or thousands of employees, but even they have an issue with this, which is we are taught at a very young age that mistakes are bad.
Mm,
And because of that, we
mm.
don't trust each other because we're saying, I can't trust this person because they might make a mistake. Well, it's not they might make a mistake. I'm going to promise you they're going to make a mistake. So the question becomes, I make a mistake, my employees make a mistake, my customers make a mistake. What am I going to do?
That is okay. That in itself is a fascinating subject because I think mistakes are great. Actually, I think they're very, very healthy because it means that people are pushing. As long as they're well trained and they understand the process, you've mapped your expertise to them in your process. Then if they make mistakes, it means that they're trying new things. I think. Unless they're just careless mistakes, those need to be managed. But if you look at, let's say, Elon Musk and how his development process is based on making mistakes or having things go wrong so that they can learn what can go wrong and how to evolve their process around that. If you watch what they did with, well, you can watch what they're doing with Starship now, but earlier when they developed the Falcon booster system, it was fascinating to see them. They kept shooting these things, the rockets up, and of course they were trying to do something no one else had done before. No country, because otherwise it wasn't even done with private companies before. But no country in their space program had been able to land a rocket booster propulsively. They were always shooting them off, and they just land in the ocean, and they were gone. They were toast. That was it. And so Elon said, no, I think there's a better way. And if we can do this, then the cost to put stuff up into space comes way down because we can keep using these boosters. I'm talking about really obvious stuff right now because we've all been through the story. We're all used to it. But the first time, so he kept sending those rockets up and they'd come down and explode. They wouldn't land right. But then when he finally stuck one of the landings, we're saying, whoa, that's interesting. And then he kept sticking them, and then he kept sticking them on barges. And now it's like I don't think they've ever missed a landing in the last, I don't know, 5 years, 10. Well, I don't know how long they've been around. I guess they've probably been around for 10 years now, but in the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, perhaps, they have not missed a landing. And so they keep using these boosters. I think there's something like 11. I think the record so far is something like 11 uses. So he has changed how things get up into space, and he's created a completely unfair advantage in the marketplace. He does it much cheaper than everyone else because he's doing it with completely different technology, essentially, and a different process. That process of his wouldn't have come about if they hadn't made mistakes and embraced the whole I don't know process of making mistakes so you can learn from them. That's
So
mistakes are I think they're incredibly valuable.
they are very valuable, but the question comes in what you do with them and what is your focus in your company towards personal responsibility. I mean, again, we've been taught that when we make a mistake, we don't take responsibility for it. We blame somebody else, or we justify why it wasn't our fault in the first place. And there's no way you can learn when you're in blaming or justifying. You only can learn when you're taking personal responsibility. And it's incumbent upon the owners of the company, especially small companies, to ask the simple question every time a mistake is made, what did we learn? And if you do that, then collaboration becomes more of a possibility. Now, I'm a real fan. We teach people to use Scrum in construction companies a lot because it's a really good tool to take waste out. And at the end of a sprint, which is a 2 or 3 week period that we're working on a particular project, we have what's called a retrospective. And at the retrospective, we ask these 3 questions. What did you love about the work last week or last sprint? What did you hate about the work last sprint? And what would have to change about the stuff you hated to become stuff you loved? And by doing that, what you're doing is you're forcing people to sit in the personal responsibility seat and not in the seat where saying, well, if only this had changed. Okay, well, what would specifically have to change to make you want to do this? And it's that sort of questions that allows business owners to get collaboration and to build extraordinary results out of their teams. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally makes sense. And I think yes, as business owners, it's incumbent upon us to look. Mistakes are going to be made. They happen. We're human. We're not perfect. So it's incumbent upon them to I think come with the with the attitude that, well, if we made a mistake, what do we learn from it? Let's make sure we learn from it. Let's not repeat it as
Right.
well. I mean, if we're making expensive mistakes, I can't stay in business. You can't have a job with me if we keep making those kinds of mistakes. But if we're making mistakes that we can learn from, those are incredibly valuable, and that needs to become part of the company culture, and that comes from the owner. So, yeah, I think absolutely makes sense.
Cool. Hey, Stu, unfortunately, we are out of time. And I'm sure people will be interested about your book, where they can find it, where they could find you. So how do they go about doing that?
Well, you can find my book anywhere, as they say, fine books are sold, and that's so Amazon, Barnes and Noble, BAM, except Books a Million, etc. Um, and I would invite you to stop by my author site. So you have to know how to spell my name. It's Stu Heinecke, StuHeinecke. So StuHeinecke.com, and you can get the first 2 chapters of How to Grow Your Business Like a Weed for free if you sign up for my list.
Cool. And I've got 2 things I'd like you to do. The first one I've asked, I think 373 times now, which is go to wherever you're listening to this podcast. I know you're listening to someplace if you are. And please give us an honest and rating review. And while you're there, subscribe. We've been doing this for about 7 years and people kind of like it. We get good reviews all the time. So please leave us a review and subscribe. And the second thing is, I write a weekly newsletter. I've been writing it weekly for about 20 years. I've been writing it for 45 years. Started off with a mimeograph machine. And unless you're over 60 years old, you probably have no idea what a mimeograph machine is, but that's okay. But at any rate, the newsletter is kind of fun. I call it my musings, and I write about something I'm thinking about that's going to make your business better. And to get it, it's really easy. You go to www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. Give me your first name and your email address. And every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock East Coast time, you'll see a new newsletter appear in your inbox. So this is Josh Patrick. We're with Stu Heinecke. We're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.